Welcome back to Game of Theories, where I introduce theories of management, administration, and leadership. In this video, we're going to embark on an exciting journey into the world of behavioral decision theory, a field that has been stirring up a storm of interest in recent decades. I'll first introduce traditional decision theory, followed by behavioral decision theory, the limits of rationality, the concept of satisficing, and controversial issue of paternalistic intervention. Traditional decision theory is all about finding the perfect solution. It focuses on prescribing a normative approach to decision rather than simply describing how people make decisions. Prescribe means that traditional decision making theory seeks to provide guidance on what decision makers should do in order to make the best or optimal decision based on certain criteria. Normative means that traditional decision theory focuses on establishing norms or standards for decision, judgment, and behavior. Traditional decision theory assumes that people always make fully rational decisions based on complete information. But that assumption was challenged by psychologist Herbert Simon. Simon was not interested in tearing down the old ways, but rather he strived to enrich them by offering a new, more nuanced understanding of how we make decisions in the real world. In the 1950s, Simon proposed a theory of bounded rationality, which argued that decision makers are limited in their ability to process and evaluate all available information and must instead rely on heuristic, that is, mental shortcuts, and simplifying strategies. Simon's work on bounded rationality was a turning point in the development of behavioral decision theory. It has been considered as the root of behavioral decision theory, which focuses on how people actually make decisions in the real world, rather than assuming that they always make perfectly rational choices. Fast forward 20 years, Simon was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in 1978 for his contribution to the development of the concept of bounded rationality. His work had broad implications for the fields of economics, psychology, and organizational theory, and remains influential to this day. Two more behavioral decision theorists, Daniel Kahneman and Richard Thaler, won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002 and 2017, respectively. Today, behavioral decision theory is a vibrant and interdisciplinary field which incorporates insights from fields like neuroscience, sociology, computer science to study decision making in a wide range of areas. In the field of management, administration, and leadership, behavioral decision theory has been used to design decision making processes that take into account the biases and heuristics that people are prone to, how people respond to incentives, and how they make trade offs between short term and long term goals, how leaders can influence the way that people perceive and evaluate information, and how leaders can use social influence strategies such as social proof or authority to persuade others to adopt certain courses of action. In the fields of administrative theory, few names loom as large as that of Herbert Simon. A true giant of the field, Simon saw decision making as the very heart of administration. According to Simon, an operational administrative decision must be correct, efficient, and practical to implement with a set of coordinated means. These are the principles that he laid out in his seminal 1947 book, Administrative Behavior, which focused on the behavioral and cognitive processes of making rational decisions. But Simon was far from content to rest on the success he had achieved with his 1947 book. In 1955, he published a groundbreaking article, A Behavioral Model of Rational Choice, which challenged the very foundation of traditional decision theory. The traditional model of decision making assumes that we are all superhuman decision makers, capable of optimizing every choice we make, have immediate and free access to information, have a well organized and stable set of preferences, remain cool headed at all times, and not swayed by emotions. Herbert Simon viewed these assumptions of the dominant traditional decision theory as unrealistic. He proposed a new rationality known as bounded rationality. Here are major propositions of bounded rationality. First, the decision maker tries to find satisfactory solutions within many cognitive, perceptual, situational, emotional, or psychological biases, cultural or social norms, physical limitations, resource constraints, or other external factors that may affect the decision making process. For instance, George Miller, an American psychologist, published a seminal article titled The Magical Number 7 plus or minus 2. In the article, Miller showed that for absolute judgments made along a single dimension or scale, such as tones, taste intensities, visual positions, loudness, and points on scales, humans are capable of a limited and narrow range of about 7 plus or minus 2. Our capacity for making unidimensional judgments is limited. When it comes to memory, psychologist Daniel Schechter identified 7 senses of memory that review just how fallible our memories can be. The 7 senses of memory are: first, transience, the tendency to forget things over time. Memories become less accessible and vivid as time passes. Second, absent-mindedness, forgetting caused by lapse in attention. It often results in forgetting where you put things, what you are going to do, or why you entered a room. Third, blocking, the inability to retrieve a memory. It is often caused by interference from other memories or information. Blocking is a primary cause of tip of the tongue phenomenon, that is, a temporary inaccessibility of stored information. Fourth, misattribution, confusing the sources of memory. This can lead to mistakenly attributing a memory to the wrong person, time, or place. Fifth, suggestibility, the tendency to incorporate misleading information from external sources into our personal recollections. Sixth, bias, the influence of personal beliefs, attitudes, and expectations on memory. Bias can lead to the distortion or alteration of memories to fit our personal or cultural expectations. And seventh, persistence, the inability to forget unwanted or traumatic memories. This can lead to the persistent recollection of painful or unpleasant events even when we want to forget them. The first 3 senses are called sense of omitting, which refer to types of forgetting. The fourth and fifth sense of memory are called sense of commission, which refer to forms of distortion. The seventh sense of memory is the inability to erase intrusive recollections. The 7 senses of memory are the result of how our memory works. When we retrieve a memory, fragmented information stored in different areas of the brain are pieced together. During this process, new information can be updated and integrated into existing memories. We actively reconstruct past experiences rather than the simple retrieval of an exact replica of the original event. The 7 senses of memory highlight the fallibility of memory and the importance of critically evaluating our recollections in personal and professional decision making. The second major proposition of bounded rationality is that a desired decision outcome is often influenced by factors such as personal goals, social norms, and past experiences. As a result, the desired outcome is not fixed, but rather dynamic and can change over time. Success or failure in achieving a particular goal can influence an individual or a group's aspirations, leading them to adjust their expectations of what is acceptable or unacceptable. For example, if you achieve a goal that you had previously thought was impossible, you may set your goals higher and raise your aspiration level. On the contrary, if you experience a setback or failure, you may lower your aspiration level and adjust your expectations accordingly. The concept of aspiration level is important in decision making because it can influence the choices we make and the criteria we use to evaluate success or failure. The third major proposition of bounded rationality is that information acquisition and processing are time consuming and costly. Therefore, the question of the ideal level of persistence in pursuit of a goal involves a trade off between the potential costs and benefits of search. The fourth major proposition of bounded rationality is that preferences are fluid. For example, preferences may change with time and maturation. Here, maturation refers to the idea that people's cognitive abilities, decision making processes, and preferences can change and develop over time as they gain more experience and knowledge. This maturation process can lead to changes in how people approach decision making tasks and the type of heuristics or mental shortcuts they rely on. As we mature, we may become more aware of our own cognitive biases and develop strategies to overcome them, or we may gain a deeper understanding of complex decision making tasks that allow us to make more informed decisions. Similarly, our preferences can change over time as we are exposed to new experiences and information, leading us to adopt different values and goals that influence our decision making processes. And of course, we may simply not know our preferences because of lack of experience or reluctance to explore options. Moreover, consequences can change our payoff function. Here, the term payoff function refers to the way in which we evaluate the potential outcomes of a decision and assign value to each possible outcome. If the consequences of a decision change, such as due to new information or changes in the decision making environment, the decision maker's evaluation of the potential outcome may also change, which can in turn change our payoff function. For example, if Anthony is considering two job offers and learns that one of the companies has a poor track record of treating its employees well, this may change Anthony's evaluation of the potential outcomes of each job offer and influence his payoff function. An example from Game of Thrones can be found in the character of Jaime Lannister. In the early seasons of the show, Jaime is depicted as a ruthless and amoral character who is primarily motivated by his desire to protect his own interests and those of his family. He pushed a young boy named Bran Stark out of a tower window in order to keep his affair with his sister a secret. However, over the courses of the series, Jamie's experiences and the consequences of his decisions change his payoff function, leading him to make different decisions than he might have otherwise. The experiences and consequences include being taken prisoner by the Stark family and developing a romantic relationship with Brienne of Tarth, a female warrior who embodies many of the values that Jaime previously rejected. This relationship leads Jaime to reconsider his loyalty to his family and his role in the ongoing conflicts of Westeros, and ultimately leads him to take actions that are not solely motivated by his own self interest. Given the limitations on rationality and the associated difficulties that come with it, the idea of human decision makers as optimizers is nothing more than an unrealistic concept. It's time to embrace the reality of our limitations and work within them to find practical and satisfactory solutions to the complex problem we face. To do so, Herbert Simon proposed the concept of satisficing. It means that human decision makers satisfice rather than optimize. Optimizers seek to determine the best possible option in the choice set, but satisficers seek the first acceptable option. Simon compared optimizers to finding the sharpest needle in the haystack, while satisficers find the first needle they come across. Some may argue that satisficing seems undesirable as it may lead to missed opportunities for better alternatives. For example, a company is looking to hire a new employee for a position, and they have a list of qualifications and requirements for the job. They receive several resumes from candidates who meet some but not all of the qualifications. Instead of continuing to search for more qualified candidates, the company decides to satisfy by choosing one of the candidates who meets most of the requirements, even though there may be better candidates out there who meet all of the requirements. This approach may lead to missed opportunities for the company to hire a more qualified and competent employee who could potentially bring more value to the company in the long run. Therefore, satisficing in this scenario may be considered undesirable as it could lead to settling for a suboptimal choice. However, Simon recognized that information search and acquisition are costly, and sometimes all that is needed is just a needle in a haystack. In the ongoing debate about human decision making, a new controversy has emerged. Is it acceptable for governments or other authorities to intervene in people's lives in order to promote certain behaviors or outcomes that are considered beneficial for society as a whole? The government intervention here is called paternalistic intervention. Why is paternalistic intervention controversial? This is because it involves authorities making decisions on behalf of individuals rather than allowing people to make their own choices based on their own values and preferences. The crux of the debate lies in the question of who gets to decide what actions are desirable and whether it's ethical to manipulate people into making certain choices. Some people argue that paternalistic interventions are necessary to promote the greater good of society and protect vulnerable individuals. Take the example of organ donation. In many countries, citizens must take a concrete action to declare their willingness to donate. But in several European countries, including Austria, citizens are presumed to be consenting donors unless they indicate otherwise. This simple change has had a dramatic impact. In Germany, where an opt-in system is used, only 12% give their consent, while in Austria, where the default is opt-out, a whopping 99% do. This is a prime example of how intervention can make a world of influence. However, critics of paternalistic interventions argue that they can be manipulative and infringe on personal autonomy. One example is the debate around mandatory vaccination laws. Some argue that these laws infringe on personal autonomy by requiring individuals to receive vaccinations, even if they may have personal or religious objections. Critics argue that this undermines people's sense of personal responsibility and self-determination by not allowing them to make their own decisions about their health. Moreover, opponents of mandatory vaccination laws argue that they can be seen as manipulative and paternalistic because they force people to receive medical treatment against their will. The debate over paternalistic intervention comes down to a balance between promoting public welfare and respecting individual freedom. It's also a delicate dance between coercion and persuasion. As we come to the end of this episode on bounded rationality and satisficing, I hope you've gained valuable insights into the realities of decision making in management and leadership. Remember, perfection may be an ideal, but in a world of constraints and limited resources, sometimes it's better to focus on finding an acceptable solution rather than striving for the impossible.